Welcome back to the Retro Horror Academy. My name is Daniel Richardson, and today we'll be talking about the year in horror 1932. Guys, it's been a minute. What was it, like November since the last time we talked? However, we got a lot to cover today, and that's kind of why, we were getting kind of caught up on some of these films, rewatching some of them and seeing some of them for the very first time. Horror has finally exploded. After a stellar year of 1931 with the releases of Dracula, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it exploded. In 32, it was the year of horror. It really was. The crazy thing about this show, the Retro Horror Academy, I'm speaking of, up until this point, I've always review and rank the movies of that year. But we'd never done more than 6 films. Those early years was because most of the films were lost or whatever. But even then, we just didn't have that many horror films per year. And the idea behind this was we'd get to 10 and we'd stop. And this is the first time there's 14 films. So we actually had to, for the first time ever in the Retro Horror Academy, we had to actually leave films off the top 10, which is incredible because that's awesome. So the movies that actually rank, actually kind of mean something instead of just being it's on there because there's only 4 films. No, we actually had to do this. So yes, we're looking at 1932 right now. Again, it's a big wave of horror films. All the studios are getting in on it. But I think the biggest footnote of the year would have to be the film White Zombie. Because this is the first time we are introduced to zombies on the big screen. And now, of course, this ain't the flesh-eating zombies that we'd be introduced to many years later. But these are the voodoo zombies. Which still, it captured America's imagination because it would start a wave of voodoo zombie films. So, that's kind of the big news coming out in 1932. So let's get into ranking the top 10 horror films of 1932. But first, you know what we do on this show? We induct a new member into the Horror Hall of Fame. And the induction in 1932 is going to be D.W. Griffith. Maybe a controversial pick, and let's be real, he was controversial even back then. We don't agree with clearly what he was kind of preaching in his films. Dude's definitely a racist. Let's just get the elephant out of the room right now. Absolutely a complete fucking scumbag racist. But a very talented filmmaker. And he has contributed to the genre of horror. He did The Avenging Conscience, based on the Edgar Allan Poe Telltale Heart. Elements of it. And then he did One Exciting Night, which is an early example of the old old dark house films. And which really I wasn't a big fan of the One Exciting Night, but I did really enjoy The Avenging Conscience. And again, he's more famous for other films. In particular, Birth of a Nation, which, very controversial, for obvious reasons. But still, I think he has made his stake in horror and contributed quite well. He also did a short film called The Sealed Room, which, I guess more of a historical drama, but there's definitely little notes of horror in that. So anyways, D.W. Griffith, take your spot in the Horror Hall of Fame. Taking a drink. I'm a one-man show here, and I don't like to edit. So, when I drink on the show, I'm drinking on the show. That's all there is to it. All right, guys, so let's get into it, shall we? We're talking about the top 10 horror films of 1932. So, coming in at number 10, Vampire. This was a German production. I think it was co-produced with France actually as well, but it's clearly a German film. The movie's about this guy who has a deep fascination with the supernatural, and he comes to this house where inside this young girl is turning into a vampire. So this thing, German expressionistic out the ass, but it has definitely more of a, I don't know, dreamlike quality to it. Not as much on the angles as much as it is on the atmosphere. With German, I guess I shouldn't say it's German expressionistic. I guess in spirit it is the vibe, the surrealness of it. Not necessarily visually, but definitely the atmosphere. This thing, the director Carl Dreyer, I think I'm pronouncing that right. He wanted to direct this movie, and he really wanted to make this movie stand out and be different than any other movie he has ever done. Or not even just he's ever done, anything that's ever been seen before. And I think he definitely succeeded for the most part. This thing is very dreamlike. Honestly, I was kind of lost through a lot of this sometimes. Some things had me kind of scratching my head. I think I kind of tied it together at the end, but this thing is very, very odd. Kind of an unusual film in the fact that it was shot mostly silent because I guess even at this stage, even though America's been doing, sound productions all right, for the past couple of years, I guess Germany was just kind of behind in the times when it came to filmmaking, or at least the equipment. And so they did have some sound in this movie. However, a lot of it was done with title cards. They did a lot of, inner title cards, and to kind of fill in the blanks, I guess. When this movie came out, it got really bad reviews. People really kind of shit on this thing. They kept comparing it to Nosferatu, not in a good way. However, and I mean, it bombed financially. I mean, it was just, bad all around. But in recent years, this thing has gotten more respect for being surreal and just kind of this unusual film. And even though, it's about vampires, yes, there's still, I don't know, it is kind of like a different take on them. And I'll get to that here momentarily. For me personally, I'm not going to lie, it is a very confusing movie. And early on, I was just like, what the fuck's going on? I will say this thing is steeped heavily in the atmosphere and mood. I don't know, there is an uneasiness when you're watching it. And there are certain scenes that do come across almost as frightening. There's a moment where this woman who is about to turn into a vampire, they got her kind of tied to this bed or a chair. And anyway, at one point, the young nun or whatever who's kind of seeing her, you see this woman, the one who's turned into a vampire, and she looks very weak, tired, she's down. But then when the young nun who's helping, put her in the chair, she looks up, and the look on this woman's face is just eerie and creepy. I mean, I can't explain it. You'd have to see it. Maybe it's just me, but I mean, literally, as I'm excuse me, as I'm watching this, that was the first time holy shit, now I'm paying attention, because I don't know, that girl just looks spooky as hell. Very creepy. The guy who I guess is the main vampire, I guess, and again, I'm kind of grasping at straws here because I'm not sure if he's a vampire or what. This guy was kind of creepy, and just how certain people just kind of emerge. I don't know, a lot of people just walking around. That's the thing too. You had a lot of shadow people. The ghost, I guess, of the servants of the vampire just kind of walking the house, and it did feel very weird because it's I don't know, they walked around like they didn't know you were there, and yet you could see. I guess it's seeing ghosts, I guess, and it was just, I don't know, it added to this insane visual that they were going for. I don't know, really, like I said, it does pick up as the movie goes on. Another thing I liked about this was they kind of talk about how these, these vampires are tied closely to Satan. Satan himself are using these vampires. And it makes sense that why a lot of Christian imagery, holy water, crosses, whatever, repel vampires. And the reasoning for this pairing, which I don't know, I've never heard this before. Maybe I have and just didn't think about it or put it together. But that's why Satan's so close to these vampires is because, he damned them. But he's using them to collect souls to bring to hell. So that's why they're turning innocent people into vampires or draining them of their blood or whatever the case is. Because these are souls that, he's collecting. Another thing about this was I like the fact that, sometimes an entire village would be cursed because a vampire is just living. Like he's like a vampire could just be buried underneath a cemetery, like not coming out or anything. But just the presence of the vampire would curse the entire town and, curse the crops or whatever the case is. So, yeah, like I said, it's definitely a different take on a vampire film. And it is, like I said, it's very slow starting off. And if you're not a silent film person, this may come in, again, even if you're not silent or, are a silent film person, I mean, you're going to have to read anyways because, the film's in, like, German or whatever. But, anyways, regardless, you got to read. But, I can see it maybe coming off boring initially. I would say if you're going to watch it, stick with it. And maybe don't go into it looking for plot. Like, literally, this thing's kind of all over the place. But, yes, number 10, Vampire. I should mention it has a 7.4 on IMDb. And it has a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, there you go. Taking a drink. All right, at number 9. The Mask of Fu Manchu. So the British government is trying to get their hands on the armor and sword of Genghis Khan before that dastardly, evil, sinister Fu Manchu gets to it. This is a U.S. film. This thing was very controversial when it came out, still considered controversial today. And I get it. But at the same time, I don't think it's nearly as bad. Well, we mentioned D.W. Griffith earlier in his movie One Exciting Night. Motherfucker was doing blackface in that movie. Or he had people, doing blackface in that movie. And I think that's way more offensive than Boris Karloff being Fu Manchu. I think he portrayed it better. I don't think the makeup looked that offensive. Like, it didn't look like, again... how can I say this without coming off sounding horrible? Yellowface just didn't look that bad on black and white camera, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it looked nearly as bad. I don't think, he had a bit of an accent, but I don't think he was doing it over the top. He wasn't doing it cartoonish. I don't know. He did it with class and dignity, which, for what it's worth, that's that. However, even when this movie came out, whatever Asian American group was around at the time, they protested and, tried to get this film pulled and everything. This movie would be re-released later on in the 50s, where, again, whatever group was, it could have been the same group, I don't know, but they also tried to, get this thing yanked and everything. So I was honestly watching this, I guess, I was looking for the trash can fire. I was looking for the train wreck. I was just looking for this thing to be so ridiculously racist. And I didn't really think it was at all. In fact, if anything, it just seemed like they hated white people more. Like there's very, I ain't gonna say there was no slurs. There was, but there was very few like anti-Asian slurs. It was more like the Asians just like, we're gonna kill the white man and take his women. That's, I think the only thing I thought was kind of funny or humorous was like, because the woman that plays his daughter, his only daughter, is she was actually Asian, right? And so, but because it's a male-dominated society, and of course he wanted to pass everything on to his son, but he never had a son, he's constantly putting her down. So it comes off more sexist than racist, I guess. And it's like at one point he's just like, my dog, ugly, daughter or whatever. And like, this woman's gorgeous. Like, oh, I'm just like, really? And that's the only thing I thought was kind of funny. But everything else, like I said, it plays out very much like an adventure spy thriller. I guess him torturing people and the fact that he's kind of a mad scientist, that's the horror, I guess, because a lot of these early horror films, they do kind of come off, like thrillers or action even, or adventure. But either way, it is what it is. My personal thought on it, I don't know. It was just standard. I think you take the controversy out of this thing, and I don't think it would have stood up as well. I think. I don't know. For me personally, I don't know. I guess I was looking for a cheap laugh, as bad as that sounds. I know I'm a bad person. Fuck you. But I guess I was looking for that cheap laugh, and I didn't get it. And I feel like, I don't know, this movie's kind of, I think the only thing it has going for it is the fact that it has this controversy. Because I think if you didn't have the controversy, and don't get me wrong, a great performance by Boris Karloff, but everyone else is just kind of so-so in here. The story's so-so. I don't know. I'm not as huge on this one as I Like me and the Academy disagreed on this one because I had this ranked much lower than Vampire, but whatever. So yeah, that was that. This thing was pre-code. There was certain lines they took out. Hate words, I guess. A lot of killing the white man stuff. They took a lot of stuff out, and then there was a scene that was taken out where this woman's being whipped or whatever. In fact, it was not in the version I watched, so I must have caught one of the edited versions that came out later on. They did restore it eventually, but yeah, you're gonna get that kind of a recurring thing from here on out. Is a lot of these films were pre-code, and then they would get edited when the Hays Code was put in place. This thing has a 6.3 on IMDb, 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it actually grossed like $300,000 back then. So it didn't do bad at the box office. I'm just saying, for me personally, wasn't that big on it, but that's just me. So number 9, The Mask of Fu Manchu. Take a drink. All right. At number 8, Murders in the Rue Morgue. This is another U.S. film right here. The main plot here is Bela Lugosi plays a mad scientist who is hell-bent on kidnapping and killing these women and then trying to mix their blood in with ape blood. For reasons, I guess, for science. This was like kind of a consolation prize for I forget the director, the original director, but him and Bela Lugosi was going to do Frankenstein initially, and then again, like I said, when they read it, they turned the script down or whatever the case was. Depending on whose side of the story you hear, which I do think. In all reality, because the script was so bad for Frankenstein initially before James Well rewrote it, but I think that's probably why they turned it down. Because a lot of people, the story for a long time was like Bela Lugosi thought he was above donning the makeup. You wouldn't be able to see my face, and I don't think that was exactly it, because he would don crazier makeup even this year. So it's like I don't buy that. Anyways, but when they turned down Frankenstein, they were kind of given this one instead. Of course, this is based on Edgar Allan Poe. His story, but I guess it's very loosely based on it. Even though a lot of people say this is the best version of any of the story, or any movie that came out based on that story. Again, pre-code. There's a lot of talk of evolution in here. Can't have that. Christians can't have that. No talk of that evolution. But there's also a lot of girls dancing, belly dancers, stuff like that. And then there was some violence that they actually cut out when the Hays Code was put in there. So they cut a lot of stuff out of this thing right here. Like a lot of movies on here that we'll get to, we're going to get to. It seemed like this one actually had a lot of decent reviews, actually. I was going to say, later on we get a lot that just had bad reviews that would later become better. But this one actually had decent reviews going in. The main thing everybody was talking about, though, was Bela Lugosi. He was definitely the standout in this movie. And he was, For me, this wasn't a bad movie, but it was also just kind of I don't know. I've seen so many, and unfortunately they do kind of blend together. And not just Bela Lugosi, but Boris Karloff. They went through a phase there from the 30s and 40s where they did a lot of mad scientist movies. The Ape and, The Ape Man and this bunch. I don't know why I just pulled those two out. I can't think of anything else. But, the one with the giant robot. I can't remember what it's called. Fucking Rob Zombie uses that giant robot. Anyways, doesn't matter. So a lot of these kind of run together for me, and I kind of feel like this is about the same thing. The only difference is he has an ape run around killing people, and there is a pretty exciting scene where this ape is climbing up the window and he kidnaps this girl from her apartment. But overall there ain't really a whole lot on here for me to really recommend unless you're just a Bela Lugosi completist. This got a 6.3 on IMDb and a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. So number 8 was Murders in the Rue Morgue. Taking a drink. All right, number 7, Dr. X. So there is a slew of murders, and this kind of wise-ass private investigator is investigating these. And it goes back to this. It's a school. what do you call that? Like a morgue school, cadaver school. I don't know what you call that. Mortuary school, but like a med school, but but basically for the dead or whatever. So yeah, this is another United States. U.S. is killing it this year, by the way. Almost every one of these is like from the U.S. I think the rest of them are from the U.S. But anyways, so this movie was one of the early films. They did like 2 or 3, if I'm not mistaken, films in the studio that were color. Now, they would eventually ditch this process because it was just too costly and took too long to do. They would eventually perfect it later on. But this is one of the early examples of this. Again, we have a lot of prostitution, or a lot of prostitutes getting whacked in this thing. And, of course, there's even talk of cannibalism. And so when the Hays Code came in, a lot of that shit is cut out as well. I guess one of the interesting notes on this thing is this would get referenced later on in the Rocky Horror Picture Show opening song, double feature. So anyways, this actually was one of them I really liked from this year. It had a lot more comedy in it from the smart-ass private investigator, but it worked, and I found it humorous. But this is also, even though I don't think you would consider this a old Dark House movie, it felt like that because at one point they kind of do a lockdown and they're trying to figure out who the killer is, kind of thing. And of course the investigator gets locked in there. The daughter of the main doctor, Dr. Xavier, she gets locked in there. And so I don't know. I like confined horror. I think any kind of horror film where it's confined and put in one location, I really dig it, and that's what this turned into the end. Yeah, I don't know. I really dug it. This thing got a 6.4 on IMDb, an 82 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it made like $500,000. So I mean, it did very well at the box office. So yeah, number 7, Dr. X. Taking a drink, taking a long drink actually. I'm gonna take a swig. All right. Let's switch it up there. All right. At number 6, Island of Lost Souls. United States film here. This thing is, so this guy unwillingly gets shipwrecked and lands on this, he gets on this island. Doesn't really land on the island. I guess he gets on a boat, head to the island. But either way, he gets on the island. And he finds out that there's a mad scientist here who is making half man, half human hybrids. Oh, excuse me, sorry. And yeah, he's none too thrilled about this. This thing is just crazy. I love it. The guy who steals the show in this one is Charles Lawton as I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's Dr. Monroe. I keep wanting to say the Island of Dr. Monroe because that's one of the remakes that gets made later on. But anyways, yeah, Charles Lawton just nails it as Dr. Monroe. You also had Bela Lugosi in this one, and he was unfortunately at this stage, and even though Dracula just came out the year before, he was getting lowballed like a motherfucker, and like he wasn't paid much to do this, but he had it's kind of a small role really, but he plays like the head of the I guess like the spiritual head of the ape creatures, animal creatures, half man, half animals. And so, yeah, but he's in this. And then this was one of the early films, but she didn't do a whole lot, of Catherine Burke. She plays the Panther Woman. She was her very first movie. They actually wanted to cast someone fairly unknown. And so they had this Panther Woman contest, and she actually won it. And, yeah, she didn't do a lot after this, but I don't know. I thought she did really good in this one. I can see where like the furries are all about this shit. Yeah, I can see it. I saw them once. I can see it. Anyways, but this was yet another of these pre-code movies, because when this thing gets run later down the road after the Hays Code is in place, there's pseudo bestiality implications here. Panther Woman wants to hook up and fuck the main guy, and again you got a mad scientist claiming he knows what it feels, or what it's like to feel like a god. A line from a White Zombie song there. So it's just like, anytime anybody compares himself to God, it's blasphemous. So, right off the bat, they got to take that stuff out. So, yeah, they definitely, ran this right through the ringer. The reviews actually were pretty good at the time when this came out as well. Like, this actually was kind of a hit, even though it really was controversial just for its subject matter alone. Of course, as years go by, this would be considered a classic. In fact, a lot of people say this is the best film based on the H.G. Wells novel. H.G. Wells, speaking of him, he was not a fan of the film. He apparently just did not like it. This would go on to spawn 2 remakes. For me personally, I dug it. I don't know. I think it has a solid story throughout. I wasn't bored with any of it. And that's the thing with some of these films, especially some of these, the ones I mentioned previously, aside from Dr. X, a lot of them were just boring or typical. And I hate to say that when it comes to these older movies because I get it, but I just feel like I've seen so many of them now with the Retro Horror Academy that a lot of them do just kind of blend together. They're just almost like carbon copies of each other. And I don't know, this one definitely had a unique vibe to it. I definitely dug it. This thing had a 7.4 on IMDb and an 88% Rotten Tomato rating. And yeah, I really dug it. I would definitely have this actually higher on the list if it was up to me. So, but again, part of the Academy, so we do what we do. So yeah, number 6, Island of Lost Souls. At number 5, Freaks. So a beautiful trapeze artist starts dating this little person. I know it's 2023. Gotta be PC. Can't say the M word. But dates this little person, and turns out though the other freaks. I guess I can say freaks though, right? That's okay. That's kosher. Fuck. Anyways, the other freaks start to kind of turn against her because they realize that she's only with him because of his inheritance. So this movie was very controversial as well because they actually casted sideshow performers who had, at this time, they had a lot of physical deformities or whatever. So you had one guy who was basically just like a human torso with a head, like no arms, no legs. You had one, people who had tiny little pincher arms or only had arms or only had legs or whatever. You had a lot of different, body types here. You had pinheads, you had little people. It ran the gamut. And so they actually did cast these people. And from the stories I read, a lot of them, unless if you sort of kind of look normal, like the little people were kind of not as mistreated. Maybe the conjoined girls weren't. But everyone else, they couldn't even eat in the commissary hall. They had to eat in a tent outside the studio because they did not want them mingling with the regular people. When this thing did come out, people were horrified and they were mad. It was exploitation. How dare you, exploit these people? And the messed up thing is, though, was not too long before this, Todd Browning, the director of Freaks, he did The Unknown with Lon Chaney, where he played an amputee. And they were fine with that. So I guess the moral is, you can't have the disabled in a movie because exploitation. But if you get someone, pretend to be disabled, that's fine. We can all sleep with that. It's really? Because just moments ago, we had a guy who wasn't Asian pretend to be Asian, and people got upset about that. And I think, you know what? Yeah, it should be the same thing with disabled, right? I mean, are you saying now just because you're disabled, you can't be in a movie? You're not good enough, like able-bodied people? I think that's bullshit. Anyway, and people still feel that way today. That's the thing. This movie is as controversial today as it was then because people still view it as exploitation. They look at this and they're just like, it's horrible how they, they're portraying these freaks. And it's but they're like the heroes of the movie. That's the thing I don't get. It's like the true villains is the beautiful people. It's the trapeze artist. It's a strong man. But I don't know. Either way, it got, people upset. People up in arms. They didn't like it. It got horrible reviews. Then, even now, there's a certain portion of the population who applaud it for being different and for, really good filmmaking. But you still have people who say this is just tasteless exploitation. So, I guess we'll never fully get this thing spun around at all. This thing actually had an alternate, or not really an alternate ending. It had portions of the ending cut out because I guess the strong man, it's just implied they kill him or leave him for dead. in the cut that you get. But initially, I guess he survives, but they castrate him, and he sings soprano. And yeah, it's like that would have been pretty fucking awesome. But yeah, it didn't make it. Either way, this movie it bombed at the box office. Like I said, bad reviews, word of mouth was negative, so it just whatever. The once again pre-code, so they cut a lot of stuff out that they considered grotesque or whatever. However, like I said, in recent years, this thing has gone on to become more of a cult film, and it really it hit like pop culture big time. Like the one of us, google gobble, one of us. Like we've seen this so many times in our music. The Ramones, Marilyn Manson, like Yo Gabba Gabba. That's where they got that whole thing from. So it's just like. You see this kind of over and over in pop culture. I don't know. It's just kind of it's just crazy. This thing you can see its influences in TV shows today, like American Horror Story, Freak Show. There was actually a movie that came out, I believe, called Freak Show in the 2000s. I forget what year exactly. This thing actually been kind of remade a handful of times here and there. But yeah, like I said, this thing for me personally. I loved it. It's a great morality tale. I don't know. It reminds me like the old EC comics, Tales from the Crypt, kind of stuff like that. Creep Show. It's morality, man. You got these beautiful people who try to take advantage of the freaks. They look down on the freaks. They think they can get away with things because who's going to believe the freaks? And guess what? The freaks band together and fuck their world up. And yeah, I don't know. I love it. I think it's really good. Highly recommend it. Definitely needs to be higher than 5 on this list. But yeah, on IMDb it has a 7.9. Has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. Fucking fresh, baby. And it made it said it bombed, but it made like 300,000 box office. So I don't know. Maybe it was made for more, or maybe it just kind of broke even and they considered it a bomb. I don't know. But either way, Freaks. Number 5. At number 4, The Old Dark House. Strangers trying to get out of a horrible storm come to this house, and the family is crazy, and they have a secret, hidden in the basement. Taking a drink. Give me a second. Okay, so this is made in the U.S. as well. This was basically brought together because of the success of Frankenstein. This reunites James Whale and Boris Karloff. We also have Charles Laughton in here. He did this and Island of Lost Souls in the same year. These guys were busy. Like, these motherfuckers were just doing everything this year. Yeah, when this thing came out, again, this is literally, they call it The Old Dark House. It is an Old Dark House movie, that same thing. They try to go more comedic with this one, as most of them did at the time, mystery. However, this thing just did not click with the contemporary audiences. They just kind of gave it lukewarm response, I guess because of the names behind it, and this is another Universal, horror film. I guess they were expecting Frankenstein 2, and they didn't get it. They got this instead. However, in recent years, a lot of people gave it much better props, much better reviews, considering this now a classic. For me personally, I'm not gonna lie, this was one of those films that bored me to death. And again, I don't know. I guess I was expecting it to be more horror, and it was just definitely more goofy comedy and bad mystery and everything else. I don't know. It just kind of missed the mark for me personally. Definitely way too fucking high on this list, in my opinion. However, it got a 7 on IMDb and a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. Go fuck yourself. Anyways, Old Dark House, number 4. At number 3, White Zombie. Another U.S. film here. In this movie, Bela Lugosi, kind of a mad scientist as well, but he's also a witch doctor or voodoo priest. Either way, he falls in love with this young girl and he kidnaps her. But again, he don't know how to display his love, so he basically turns her into one of his voodoo slaves. So this is the movie we were talking about earlier. This is a renaissance of the zombie films here, and this thing, kicked off a whole new era of zombie films. The whole cycle of it. They would go through the 30s into the 40s. So this was a lower budget movie. RKO jumped in on this one. They did a couple of them that, I guess weren't always low budget, but this is definitely one of the lower ones right here. Again, Bela Lugosi basically getting, paid bargain basement, pay here, which is really sad. Because, again, the reviews for this movie were very so-so. But everyone agreed that Bela Lugosi did really good here. And even the reviews now, with the people, viewing this thing retroactively, they'll say the same thing. Even the ones who give it props, they're like, yeah, it's an okay movie, it's decent or whatever. But they all will applaud Bela Lugosi. I just feel like he was very underappreciated during this era. I'll take a drink. Thank you. Yeah, very underappreciated during this era, and I kind of feel bad for the guy. I kind of feel like, don't get me wrong, Boris Karloff is a great actor, and he clearly took off, and unfortunately kind of left Bela Lugosi in the dust. And even though right now he's still in his prime, but you can already kind of see, right now, the way Karloff's getting roles and the way Lugosi's getting roles. It seems a little unfair. This thing, again, like other films from this era, seem to inspire things today. Most notably, though, of course, aside from zombie films, it gave the band White Zombie their name, which is kind of odd because I'm like, really? This movie? I guess White Zombie does sound cool, but it's like, I don't know. Call your band Dracula. Like, why not? Just call your band Frankenstein. Better movies. But anyways, this thing would spawn a sequel, Revolt of the Zombies, which, depending on who you ask, I guess, some people say it's kind of like a loose remake more than anything else than a sequel, but it's considered a sequel on IMDb, so we'll call it a sequel here. This is a movie, honestly, I don't know, the more I watch it, the more it grows on me. Because, again, when I watched it when I was real young, and the fact that White Zombie took their name from this, I thought it was going to be fucking badass. And I watched this, and I was very disappointed. I just thought it was boring and, I don't know, very ho-hum. However, I've seen it since then, and the more I watch it, the more it kind of, like I said, it grows on me. I do kind of, come around on it. But, I don't think it's the classic everyone else says it is, but, I definitely respect its place in the Hall of Horror. This thing has a 6.3 on IMDb and 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. And with it being the number 3 film, this wins the Bronze Skull Award. So there you go. We can add it to the list, the prestigious list of Bronze Skulls. So there you go. See, the Bronze Skull actually means something when you rank them out of 10 instead of only having 3 movies. Or some years we didn't even have 3 movies, so we didn't always have a Bronze Skull. So anyways, there you go, Bronze Skull Award. So at number 3, White Zombie. At number 2, The Most Dangerous Game. Another U.S. film here. Got this psychotic big game hunter who is just sinking ships so he can hunt the passengers on his island. So yes, this movie, based on a book, and I believe the book is actually called The Most Dangerous Game as well, if I'm not mistaken. The funny thing about the production of this movie is that this was shot, so they were shooting King Kong at the time. They had the exotic location picked out, and they had the sets built, and all that stuff, this cast, and they just basically used the same team and started shooting at nights, and they basically got 2 movies shot for the price of 1, which I think is fucking brilliant. Roger Corman would be proud. This thing, when it came out, had really good reviews. And became almost like an instant classic. Even though it fell into public domain pretty quickly, I'm like, man, no one paying attention here? Like, holy shit. But, again, like I said, people love it, everything else. It would go on to inspire a slew of movies where people would, hunt people. My favorite version, I guess you call it a remake. I guess a remake. Surviving the Game with Ice-T, probably my favorite version of this. For me, personally, this movie isn't bad. But again, I don't know, I feel like it's a product of its time. Again, I grew up watching Surviving the Game, so this was just kind of like a cheaper more low budget version. Again, I'm not faulting it. It's 1932, so I'm not expecting to be uber badass like other films. But again, it is what it is. Like I said, definitely deserve this place. I'm not taking nothing away from it. Just for me on a personal level, I just don't rank it nearly as high as other people do, I guess. This got a 7.1 on IMDb. Has 100%. God damn, Rotten Tomatoes, baby. Fucking certified fresh. And this thing grossed like $400,000. So, I mean, this thing, boom, total package for sure. And, of course, it's number 2. So, it wins the Silver Skull Award. So, number 2, The Most Dangerous Game. And that leaves just one movie. I'm going to take another drink before I get started on this one. Oh, yeah. See, we should make these videos because you can see me drinking. It wouldn't be as boring for you guys. But you guys got to wait a good 10 seconds between drinks now. At number 1, The Mummy. A mummy comes back, is resurrected, and he's searching for who he believes is his long-lost reincarnated love, who was a princess in his time, and he kidnaps this girl to try to bring back that princess. Filmed in the U.S. Again, I think every film on here on the top 10 was United States except for Vampire. So this thing was basically brought about because of the success of Dracula and Frankenstein. Like, Universal knew they had a winning formula, and they're like, fuck it, this is what we're doing. And so literally they made, I guess, Dracula again, but they added more Egyptian stuff, and instead of a vampire, we have a mummy. And at the time, you gotta realize that this was around the time that they were, excavating and opening up the pyramids and, different tombs and stuff in Egypt. And so this was like all over the news. So, I mean, it made a perfect, fit. You can see why they would go and, make this movie. This movie, they got director, I'm going to butcher this guy's last name, I apologize, Carl Freund. I'm going to say Freund. He was actually the cinematographer for a lot of movies, but like most notably Metropolis and Dracula. I know he's done a lot of cinematography for horror films that we've covered on here. I want to say he did the Cat and the Canary. I could be wrong, but I want to say, and he may have done a Phantom of the Opera as well. So, I mean, this guy, he was a heavyweight, and so he got to step up, become director. However, the lead actress they got was Zeta Johan. And this girl, from what I read, she seemed wacky as shit. Like, she also believed in reincarnation, and she was into the occult and all kinds of weird shit. And either way, they clashed quite a bit on set. And, I mean, I guess Carl was just a dick. And he, like, certain scenes, like, she was like, it'd be like a cold set, and she'd be, like, in a skimpy outfit. And he'd be like, nope, don't cover her up. And she'd cry, and he'd be like, nope, she's just trying to get sympathy. Fuck. It's almost like Stanley Kubrick and Shelley Duvall. It reminded me a lot. Like, when I'm reading these stories, I'm like, this feels like The fucking Shining. But anyways, a lot of on-set tension there. And I don't know if Zeta ever recovered from this, dude, because they clearly took the director's side after this movie, came out. But anyways, as I mentioned before, Boris Karloff, maybe I did mention it, Boris Karloff plays the Mummy, and another just spot-on perfect makeup job from Jack Pierce. He designed the Mummy makeup, which was so extensive and crazy that when they put it on, they only shot the beginning of it. 'Cause I guess it was just so much that they decided, you know what, we can't keep, it's going to delay production, doing this every single day, putting this makeup on. So they basically had it where he was restored, his youth or whatever, and so Boris Karloff would play it without the makeup after that. But yeah, really good, makeup effects and everything like that. This thing came out, it made money, it, got really good reviews. It spawned multiple sequels. Well, they weren't really sequels per se. It was like, it spawned a remake. Oddly enough, that they didn't call it The Mummy. What was it? The first one was called like The Mummy's Hand. There's 4 of them. The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Hand, and The Mummy's... Did I say curse? I don't know. Either way, it was like The Mummies and then just throwing it down. So they did a bunch of them. Then the Hammer studio in the 50s and 60s would, make a few movies. And then in the 90s, Brendan Fraser, or Fraser, how do you pronounce his last name? Him, and he became joined the Mummy, and they did a whole series of movies, not just based on the Mummy, but then the Scorpion King got a spin-off series and shit. They tried to remake it again for the Dark Universe, and it sucked, so that's why they didn't do any more of that. Me personally, I really like the Mummy. I'm a big fan of it. It does kind of, I don't know, I do kind of feel like when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, they're definitely following a formula. And so, I don't know. I do think the sequels are actually better than this first one. But, like I said, this first one, it's one started all. It has the iconic look. Because I think in the other Mummy movies, they just kind of go for just wrapping the guys up and throwing a mask on them. I don't think they do the extensive makeup that Jack Pierce did on this one. I could be wrong, but I don't think they did after this. So, like I said, this one, it's number one. I'm not arguing that because, honestly, it's iconic. It really is. I mean, the Mummy is one of the Universal monsters. He's kind of the odd one, though, out. It seems like Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, and the Wolfman are always kind of powering up and doing shit, and the Mummy's kind of like in Egypt, so he's just kind of doing his own thing. Even though they bring him to Louisiana in the remake. So, yeah, you know what? He should have been featured more. I'm a poser. I have not seen any of the Abbott and Costello Universal horror films. So I don't know if there is some crossover there. Maybe there is. I don't know. But either way, Mummy definitely deserves a spot top of the list. Has a 7.0 on IMDb, 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's our number one movie. So it's the winner of the Golden Skull Awards. So there you have it, guys. Number one's The Mummy. So this is a recap of what we talked about tonight. D.W. Griffith was inducted into the Horror Hall of Fame. At number 10 was Vampire. Number 9, The Mask of Fu Manchu. Number 8, Murders in the Rue Morgue. Number 7, Dr. X. Number 6, Island of Lost Souls. Number 5, Freaks. Number 4, The Old Dark House. At number 3, winner of the Bronze Skull Award, White Zombie. At number 2, winner of the Silver Skull Award, The Most Dangerous Game. And at number 1, the winner of the Golden Skull Award, The Mummy. So, guys, that is all I have for this week, this year, this episode. We're so inconsistent, and I do apologize for that. On behalf of the Academy, I apologize. Again, we just try to watch the movies again to get kind of a fresh take on it, so it does take a little bit longer now, because now we're having 10. We're having 10 movies now on these. Of course, the horror cycle will die back down, and we'll go back down to small numbers. But until then, we're going to ride this wave out. So I don't know when we'll drop 1933, but it will be as soon as we can. So on behalf of the Retro Horror Academy, my name's Daniel Richardson, and you're dismissed.